Hey, welcome into Cincinnati Podcasts. After a great bye week from Cincinnati, they played a great game. Oh, they didn't play one, but we had some great games that happened, and it was such a fun weekend of college football. A lot of big boys losing and a lot to talk about this week. Excited to have you here this week. We got my main man, Greg, over in the Carolinas. What's up, Greg?
Not much. How's it going?
Oh, it's going great. It's going great. And I'm back on the East Coast time zone here. I'm in Ohio in the stomping grounds here. Excited to talk some Cincinnati back in the home state, baby. It feels good. It feels good. Surrounded by cornfields. I don't know what's better. But let's dive in here. Let's dive in. We got a lot to talk about here. We're going to talk about these new rankings, some people that moved up, some people that moved down. We're going to talk about what we saw out of Notre Dame in the game versus Wisconsin. And then we're going to give a preview of what we want to see Cincinnati do versus Notre Dame in this big matchup. So before we get into that, this podcast is sponsored by Chili Labs. Chili Labs is owned and operated by a UC alum and is the most affordable lab-tested CBD on the market. You can find out more at chililabs.com and use the promo code CATS for 10% off. So let's dive right in, man. First of all, big news, Cincinnati moves up in the rankings to number 7 in the country, and we're now 9th favorite to win the national championship in betting odds, which is awesome. So great bye week for Cincinnati, not doing anything and moving up in all his great categories. So, that was a nice bye week, but we have Notre Dame actually moving up to number 9. So that makes us have a big matchup, 7 versus 9, but we'll get to that later. Let's first dive in here to one of the losers this week. Texas A&M loses this week. And they drop drastically in the rankings. That's another undefeated team gone in front of Cincinnati. So that's the first big one. What are your thoughts on that, Greg?
I've just been waiting for all these dominoes to fall, and there's one. That's a big one right there.
Yep.
I mean, I think it just showed you kind of like how we talked about this last week. Like all these top teams eventually are going to cannibalize each other.
Yeah.
Which, again, I've said it a million times, if all things go well, like I think they will, win out in the AAC, and it gives us a pretty good path. Like that A&M loss was huge. Clemson loss was big, though we knew they had no chance at the playoff, but it's the Clemson name, so who knows what. If you put an undefeated UC against a one-loss Clemson, I think they'd still be getting in, even as terrible as they've played this year. But it was a big weekend.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. I mean, Texas A&M loses to Arkansas, but they had a backup QB in. So, I'm hoping the committee doesn't take that into consideration and still rank them high because A&M had a backup QB in, but they have not looked good all year. They couldn't move the ball regardless, so I'm not worried about them. We can talk about this Clemson loss, though, because like you said, I think they would have gotten in if they were one loss over us. I really do. But now they're out. NC State takes them down. Their offense looks stagnant. That is basically all she wrote for the ACC's playoff chances.
Being in Raleigh, where NC State is, I did not really have my eyes on that game because I assumed Clemson was going to win, and I wasn't really checking in. I ended up getting in a lift later that night, right as NC State had won, and the driver broke the news to me, and I was ecstatic. That was crazy. That was great to hear.
I mean, I don't know what's going on with Clemson, man. Their offense just looks stagnant. You had DJ Uyulugalele, what I can't ever pronounce his last name. DJU, as I like to call him. He just can't move the ball. And he's a 5-star recruit. It's not like he's not talented. They just have a stagnant offense. I don't know what is going on there, but something has to change because Clemson does not look like itself.
He's averaging, so in their, I think 4 games they've had this season, 4 or 3, I think 4. He's averaging 5.2 yards per attempt.
It's crazy.
And completion percentage, 56%, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, also been sacked 9 times, which reminds me of someone else who I'm going to talk about later. But it's unbelievable. I thought he was not so much the second coming of Trevor Lawrence, but going to step right in and be an amazing backup. But losing ETN, you don't have to focus as much attention on him, and locks basically everybody else up. And until he can prove he can pass like Trevor Lawrence, they might take a couple more.
Yeah, they might. They almost lost to Georgia Tech, for gosh sake. So,
Yep.
yeah, I'm a little surprised at them. They just do not look like themselves. North Carolina lost as well. So that's great.
Yep.
The ACC's done. Take them out of contention. They're not in the playoff anymore, which is awesome for UC. So that's a great one. The other one that was close, that would have been huge for us, was Oklahoma. Man, they dropped in the rankings from 4 to 6 because they've had 2 bad weeks in a row now, maybe 3 actually, if you count the Tulane game.
Yeah.
And they almost lose to West Virginia. Lucky escape from West Virginia here. At one point in the game in the fourth quarter, they're at the 1 yard line and score, but there was a false start and they had to go back and ended up getting a field goal there and losing on a last second field goal. Shocked that Oklahoma got away with that. They looked like the worst team.
Oh, yeah. And you saw Rattler dropped in the Heisman odds too after that, which I'm not surprised. Like, putting up 16 points. You're Oklahoma, which Big 12, you're known for scoring 55 a game, giving up 45 a game. But what are you doing scoring 16 points against West Virginia?
Crazy.
Not a bad team. West
No.
Virginia's pretty solid, but they put up 23 against Nebraska. 40 against Tulane, but they also gave up 35. That was a close game. They haven't been, you take out that Western Carolina game where they won 76-0. They have been within 7 points of all 3 real opponents this season.
Yeah.
40-35, 23-16 against Nebraska, 16-13 against West Virginia. That's unbelievable. And it makes you think they're bound to take a loss along the way.
Yeah, it's wild to see them struggle so much at what they're supposed to be known for, which is explosive offense. And that's just not what they've, and surprisingly, the past few games, their defense has played pretty well. So you can't be, it's wild to see the reverse happening. And that Big 12 is all of a sudden turning into something. Texas just throttled Texas Tech, and that's not Western Carolina. That's Texas Tech. That's an actual Power 5 team. Granted, they clearly aren't that good, but Texas might be the best team in that conference. They've already lost to Arkansas. And then you got Baylor and Oklahoma State, both undefeated 4-0 right now. There's going to be a lot of cannibalism just in that league as well, and that's all we can continue to hope for as Cincinnati fans.
Oh, yeah. Just keep beating each other up. That's all we can pray for.
Yeah, exactly. The other one that happened this week in the rankings was Arkansas jumps up to number 8 and they go play Georgia this week. And that's going to be an interesting one. Disappointing that game day looks like they're going there. And, game day, I don't know what you were thinking going to Wisconsin, Notre Dame, when you had this game lined up now with Cincinnati, Notre Dame. Same thing with Big New Kickoff. They're going up to Wisconsin, Michigan, because they also went to the Notre Dame game. Pretty unfortunate, but either way, we got this Arkansas game versus Alabama, man. This is going to be interesting. Alabama or Georgia, I'm sorry. Arkansas versus Georgia, apologies. Arkansas looks like a pretty good team here, man. What are your thoughts on this?
Dude, Arkansas has really surprised me. Brett Bielema, great coach at Wisconsin, but the way they beat Texas and then the way they're just playing extremely well and a lot stronger than, I didn't have them anywhere in my mind at the beginning of the season.
No,
but who are you pulling for though in this Georgia Arkansas?
I think I'm pulling for Arkansas here. I think Arkansas is going to lose 1 or 2 more just because they're Arkansas throughout the year.
Yeah.
I think Georgia losing would help us more because they're probably going to end up losing again to Alabama. And a 1-loss Georgia, versus us, that might be difficult, so I'm not sure. It's going to be interesting. Arkansas plays Alabama here in a few weeks. So that they're probably going to take an L on that, but it's interesting. Are Arkansas and Georgia in the same division? I'm not 100% sure. If they are, then we might need Georgia to win that one, so it'll be difficult, but either one seems to be good for us. Obviously the more undefeated teams that lose, the better, but I would vote Georgia because they're probably higher in the committee's eyes than Arkansas would be at the end of the year.
Yep. And yes, they are. No, actually, no, Georgia and Arkansas are not in the same division. Also, I said Brett Bielema. He has not been.
Yeah, he is not there for a while.
2017. He's at Illinois now.
I was going to let it slide. I wasn't going to say.
Once I said it, I was like, that was not right.
Yeah, so we want Arkansas to win then so that they can.
Yep.
So that they'll eventually lose to Alabama.
Exactly.
But yeah, that'll be an interesting one. The other one, the big jump, Ole Miss jumped up to 13. They played Bama this week. That'll be an interesting one. Number 1 versus number 13. Bama needs to be careful here on upset alert. You got the Heisman favorite in Matt Corral just dominating, and Ole Miss can score. And that defense looked a little leaky versus Florida. That's not the Bama's defense you've known your whole life growing up. So it's going to be interesting, actually. I think they got to watch out here.
Yep. I'm just, give me chaos. Give me as much chaos as possible. But the thing that just scares me a lot is a Georgia or Alabama. And I know they're going to most likely face off in the championship at the end of the SEC season, but it just scares me, a 1-loss Georgia, a 1-loss Alabama.
Exactly.
And I don't know. It's tough. I'm almost pulling for them both to just go all the way until that SEC championship game, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely pulling for Alabama to go undefeated just because they'll take out all the ranked opponents ahead of them.
Yep.
They're going to knock out every SEC team. They already knocked out Florida. They're going to knock out Ole Miss probably, then Arkansas, then Georgia. I mean, all these teams are going to fall to the wayside eventually if Alabama goes undefeated. So if we can get 1 or 2 more losses of them cannibalizing each other throughout the season, that's a win.
And the SEC West is a lot stronger. I mean, you have Georgia and Florida in the East, and that's absolutely it. Everybody else is garbage. But yeah, in the West, you have Bama, Arkansas, LSU, Ole Miss, Auburn, A&M.
Crazy.
Mississippi State's really the only one that's not a powerhouse right now.
They're not horrible either.
Exactly. 2-2.
Yeah.
Lost 2 in a row, but 2-2.
Yeah.
That SEC West intense.
It's crazy. So that'll be an interesting one. Ole Miss is going to be able to keep up in points. That's not going to be their problem. It's going to be, can they stop Alabama and, not turn the ball over most likely. So we'll see. Exactly. But there's a lot that's happening. We got a big week of college football matchups coming up, and I'm sure there'll be some more upsets. There's been at least 5 ranked teams that have lost every week so far. So, it's going to be chaos, it seems like, this year. And Cincinnati's got a big one, maybe one of their biggest ever, and possibly their biggest ever, definitely in the, since that Florida Cincinnati game that they played about 10 years ago. So let's look back to Notre Dame's game versus Wisconsin here and do a little diagnosis of what we saw, what our thoughts were on Notre Dame, and then we can jump into a little preview of it. What were your initial thoughts after watching that Notre Dame game?
It was just ugly, and I don't think that the score reflected the actual outcome of that. I mean, you put up 31 points in a quarter. That's insane. But 2 pick sixes, a kickoff return for a touchdown. You take that away and it's 10 points in a quarter, and that's a much closer game. They had a lot of help on the defensive and special team side of the ball. Not that I'm taking that away, because when we played Indiana almost 2 weeks ago, Trey Tucker had that kickoff return for a touchdown. Deshaun Pace almost had an interception return for a touchdown. So not disparaging that at all, but that was an ugly game, and it was much closer if Graham Mertz isn't trash.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. I mean, he threw 4 picks. They also had a fumble, and they had a special teams return for touchdown, 2 pick six. I mean, like you said, 31 points in a quarter is awesome. And I'm giving Notre Dame credit that their defense is solid, because they have Kyle Hamilton at safety, who's the best safety top in football, and going to be a top 10 draft pick. The guy's awesome. Also, it was a kind of a big loss for Notre Dame. We want to point out Jack Cohn left the game with an injury, couldn't return. So that's a little something to look forward, in coming up. But yeah, the game's a lot closer than it looked here. At first I thought Wisconsin was going to squeak out with it. But Notre Dame really turned it on at the end. I think Notre Dame just looks like one of those teams that isn't electrifying, doesn't do anything great, but they're just really buttoned up. Yep. They're really buttoned up and they do special teams well. Those teams are always annoying that are good on special teams kind of thing. So yeah, the game did not look, the score doesn't reflect that game. That game was much closer for sure. Wisconsin just couldn't move the ball at all. They have no dynamic pieces on offense to get the ball to. So Notre Dame just had to keep everything in front of them, but they really shut down Notre Dame's run game. They really did.
Yep. And also that Wisconsin offense is really not good, but their defense is
defense is very good.
How many rushing yards did Notre Dame have on Sunday or Saturday?
They did not have a lot. I think they were averaging like 3 yards a carry. It was like
no, not a carry.
Or total. They had 35 rushes for 5 yards or something like that, right? It was one of the craziest stats.
3 yards, yep.
That's one of the craziest stats you've ever seen. So they were not running the ball at all. And that's what they had kind of been known for before this game, was that they were a running team. Now with this QB controversy coming up, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Jack Cohn supposedly still the starter, Brian Kelly says. But if he can't go, that completely changes everything. And hey, Cincinnati's more than happy to take advantage of that.
I mean, you throw in Drew Pine, and while he played well, he was 6 for 8, 81 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah,
he played well. Also, Wisconsin wasn't planning for him, which take that.
Wisconsin has a good run defense. They don't have a good pass defense. Their D line is solid, and that's what they really did, was try to stop the run game, which they were successful in, and that's why the game was close until the fourth quarter and their QB messed up. So
even that being said, with not a great passing defense, 15 for 29, 158 yards, QBR of 58.6 for Jack Cohn. And I don't know what his,
and you're starting with great field position because you're getting, 2 other picks and a fumble recovery. So you're starting in great field position half the time if you're Jack Cohn and Notre Dame too. So
exactly,
it's going to be interesting. Let's switch over here to a little bit of a preview of what we think we're going to see, what we're hoping for here in this game that we have coming up at Notre Dame. Going to be huge, 2:30 Eastern. What are your thoughts, man? And Cincinnati's biggest game in what may be program history, but definitely in a top 5 game all time. What are your thoughts?
I mean, you already touched on Kyle Hamilton. Beast. He's absolutely incredible. He's going to be a top 5 pick in the upcoming draft. 3rd in the nation with 3 picks, tied for 3rd. And most we have, Arquan Bush has 2, and then Sauce has 1, even though nobody ever throws at him.
Yeah.
And Brian Cook, Javon Hicks, Deshaun Pace all have 1. So Kyle Hamilton gets the ball. I think he had 2 in that Florida
ball
State
hawk.
game.
He's just a football player, man.
I'd like to not see him make a big impact on the game. And I'm sure Mike Denbrock is game playing against that, but he's always somebody in that's going to be in the back of everybody's head that we need to kind of stay away from. But I think we need to get off to a faster start. And it's been kind of clear that we've been slow, even against Murray State. We've been a slow starting team this season, but I keep going back and thinking I know we opened up the game plan a little bit more when we played Indiana because it's Indiana, but I'm still thinking we're holding on a little bit to giving Marcus Freeman any more tape because he knows a Mike Denbrock offense for the most part. Obviously going to change some things up this year, but he knows Mike Denbrock. He knows Dez. I don't know. I think we still have a little bit more to show, and that makes me excited for how we can play against this defense. So
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting game. I think this has got to be a game for Dez here. And just for context for everyone listening out there, this is a wild game between Cincinnati and Notre Dame, not just because it's 7-9, but Brian Kelly coached at Cincinnati. Marcus Freeman is now the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, coached at Cincinnati last year. We also have the strength and conditioning coach at Notre Dame was with Brian Kelly in Cincinnati. Then you have our assistant Denbrock was an assistant under Kelly at Central Michigan and has been with Brian Kelly for a long time, and Notre Dame. And then we also, I believe our wide receivers coach also was played at Notre Dame.
And
so
you have Mike Mickens, the legendary defensive back at UC, on the Notre Dame coaching staff.
So there's a lot deeper roots to this Cincinnati Notre Dame game than people even give it credit for. It's going to be a wild one. Cincinnati coming off a bye. Luke Fickell even said he was not happy with the bye. Kind of interesting. He said he got him out of rhythm, and he doesn't like that this early in the season because he doesn't have any injuries because they've only played 3 games. So kind of interesting thought process when everyone's excited for them to get extra week to prepare. He didn't like it. So how's he going to react? I totally agree. We need to get off to a hot start here. I hope they have this entire game freaking scripted at this point. You had 2 weeks to get this thing going. This needs to be a game about Dez, though. Dez has gotta have a big game. No more of these 200-yard passing games for a touchdown and you rush in one and you have 30 rushing yards. I need a monster game from him. 4 TD passes, 80 yards rushing and a touchdown. I need him to take control of this game. He's the 3rd odds-on favorite for the Heisman right now. He continues to move up on a bye week, even though he hasn't played his best football yet. It's got to be a game that Dez takes over, and he can do it. He can do it. I'm not scared of this Notre Dame team at all from what I've seen this year. They do not scare me like Notre Dame teams have passed. It's got to be a big game from him.
Yep. And I mean, just talking about the Notre Dame defense, it's been pretty good overall. They gave up 38 to 0-4 with a loss to an FCS school, Jacksonville State, Florida State team, which is unbelievable. And that's even before I'm losing his name right now, the former UCF quarterback, not Dylan Gabriel. Well, the one that's now on I can't think of his name, the one that got really hurt. But that was before he even really got into the game. But I think we already talked a little bit about Jack Cohn, but like he really does not scare me. And I mean, like you said, he got hurt in the Wisconsin game. He threw 158 yards on 51% completion percentage. That's his completion percentage is down 9% from when he was at Wisconsin, which I think is a really big telling fact that this Notre Dame offensive line, for maybe the first time you've seen in the Brian Kelly era, is terrible. He's been sacked 19 times this season. Like that's unbelievable. 5 to Wisconsin, 4 to Purdue, 6 to Toledo, and 4 to Florida State.
Crazy.
Like, so I think we have that powerhouse defensive line, which we've only had 4 sacks on the season. Majay still hasn't actually gotten to the quarterback.
They just get rid of the ball quick because they know we're coming.
The amount of times he's been up in the quarterback's face with his hands up trying to block it, or they just get the ball out quick, is unbelievable. But I mean, I'm not worried about Jack Cohn. Michael Mayer, I think, and a lot of people think, is the best tight end in the country, though they don't really use him effectively. It's kind of unbelievable. Like they call him Baby Gronk for a reason.
Yeah.
Like he's built like him. He looks like him. Like I don't really understand that thought process, but I'm not really worried about this Notre Dame offense. And like it showed with a couple of those 2 pick sixes or kickoff return for a touchdown, there's 21 points out of their entire score from last week against the best team they faced all season. I'm excited. I'm really ready to play this game.
Yeah, I'm really excited as well. I think as long as we can control, not turn the ball over, get going quick, really get the run game established with Ford. I
Yep.
want him to have 100+ yards. I'm not that nervous, man. You're telling me that this guy can't complete 50% of his throws versus Wisconsin's crappy secondary, and we have one of, if not the best secondary in the entire country, and he thinks he's going to throw on us? I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not too concerned. And I think Jack Cohn's going to make a go of this, which could benefit us because I don't think he's going to be 100%.
Agreed.
He said he was on the sideline. It's just a soft tissue injury that he had. So it's mainly about how much can he bear the pain. And he was on the sideline during that game wincing because he couldn't throw. And I think he's going to be in pain the entire game versus us. And then he might get pulled in the third quarter if he's not performing, and we're blowing him off the freaking field. So I'm excited. I was really nervous about this game all year. I was, but the more I've seen Notre Dame play and watched our games and see us underperform, I'm excited that hopefully we can really bring our best. And if we can win this game by 2 touchdowns, that would be a huge testament to us. We've opened as the favorite. We were 1.5 point favorite when we opened. We're now 2.5. It's going to be an awesome, awesome game.
Yep. And I really think getting that Indiana game out of the way, where we got to be in a very tough opposing environment, I think that was perfect timing. Yeah. Get those big game jitters out. Take a bye week, though Luke Fickell doesn't like it. I like it. Take a bye week. Next week, you're ready for a big crowd. There we go.
Oh, yeah. This is exciting, man. I'm excited. Any last thoughts on this game before we call it a day and, get ready to watch some football this weekend?
I think we got it. Go Cats.
Oh, man. It's going to be exciting. Notre Dame, Cincinnati, number 7, headed to number 9. Huge game for the Bearcats this weekend at Notre Dame at 2:30 Eastern. Also, sidebar, we all are Indiana fans this weekend. They play Penn State. Let's hope they get a W, knock out an undefeated team, and up our resume a little bit. That's always nice. So go Hoosiers and go Cats, baby. Greg, we'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
All right. Peace.